We are at 12:01. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I guess people will just kind of straggle on in to Broker Chat. Welcome to fall, my favorite time of year. I don't know about you, but it is for me. And this is the last Broker Chat for September. We are, this is Broker Chat for those of you that have not been on this call before. Tom Fulkerson is your qualifying broker, and I'm the managing broker in the Midtown office. And we conduct this presentation twice a month on things and topics that, as brokers, we see are regular repeat items, or we have to remind you about something that you're forgetting to do, or you guys have sent in requests saying, hey, the next time we have this, could you talk about this, that, and the other? So I usually have a topic so that we're just not staring at each other on Zoom. And sorry about that. Let me turn my phone off. It's been a morning. Hold on. Let me take that away. Sorry about that. And I usually have a topic, and then this topic this week is going to be about distressed homeowners situations that you may run into. Now, I know we've had a lot of classes in the market centers and a lot of things written about, oh, there's not a lot of foreclosures and things of that nature. And that is, for the most part, true. However, there are circumstances that have happened 2, 3, 4 years ago that may start to show now, and you need to be ready for that. There are a lot of people that bought in 2020 with no appraisal, no inspections, no anything. And then here we are 3, almost 4 years soon to be, where they may run into some situations. I am noticing it. I have talked to people, I've talked to agents that are running into this type of situation. And if you are newer to the business, you probably haven't experienced yet. So we want to make sure that you're ready for it. So before I get started, are there any questions? Hey, Barbara, are there any questions or comments before we get started? Yes, no? I didn't hear you, Barbara. Did you try to say something to me? Yeah. Your volume is not, or I don't think it's me because mine's up pretty high. If you look in the chat, you'll notice there's a handout there. So please feel free to download that so you can follow along and take your own notes as I get my screen here and share it. And my assistant was clever and put this little video on here. So hopefully it won't play again. I don't know what it was doing, but I wasn't ready for that. All right. So let's talk about distressed properties. We all know there's foreclosure, right? We know there's bankruptcy, short sales. We haven't seen that or heard that word in a while. Homeowners association, that might be new to you, but we are in the third quarter of the year, about to enter the fourth quarter in another week or so. And a lot of homeowners associations, including my own, we start to have our meetings in fourth quarter, maybe even the first quarter of the following year. I usually, where I live, we have it in December. So if there's anything that's being proposed or anything that is increasing, we would know that right about now. So if you're a listing agent or buyer's agent, you need to make sure that you ask these questions at listing appointments and you check that community association disclosure to see if they have the latest and greatest numbers, okay? Because you have a lot of homeowners that just pay the bill, they never go to the meetings, they don't participate, they just live there. And then you have some homeowners who live there and have no intentions of ever paying the fees. Property taxes. Many of our counties are going to be due October 15th, November, December. It's a good thing to know whether or not those taxes are paid. And I'll show you or tell you where you can go to find that out. When I go on an appointment, I check the property taxes to see if they've been paid based on whatever county they live in. And then, of course, divorce. Now, one thing about distressed properties, if there's a divorce, there might be a bankruptcy or foreclosure and a short sale involved. So you want to kind of figure out what's going on in situations like that. So let's start off with bankruptcy. in our world, there's lots of chapters. There's 11, there's all kind of chapters, but the only two that we typically see the most is 7 and 13. So they're either liquidating or they're reorganizing. And sometimes if they filed bankruptcy, you might want to make sure they're also current with the mortgage, because sometimes that means they have filed bankruptcy to slow the foreclosure down. It doesn't go away, but you will notice on this line here where it says, can it stop a foreclosure under 7? No, but it can delay it. And chapter 13, there's a yes. Now, I'm not an attorney. I just play one on TV, so I'm not going to get into any legalese here. So if you do run into a situation where a listing is filed under a bankruptcy, or you ask that question and they tell you yes, you want to get your closing attorney involved. You want to make sure you know where they are in the bankruptcy before you go listing it. There's nothing worse than listing a property only to find out the seller didn't tell you this, and then the buyer is ready to close and there's an issue because this hasn't been run through the trustee who gives permission. So there's a third party who gives permission. You will still negotiate with the seller and the buyer, but there's usually a trustee that says, okay, yes, you can sell that property for that amount, and so on and so forth. Any questions about bankruptcy? And please feel free to take a snapshot of this screen, and you also have it in the handout as well. Any questions about bankruptcy?
No, but hi. I cannot find the handout in the chat.
Oh, let's see. What is going on with the handout? I did see it.
I see it now. It just got loaded. September broker chat handout.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other questions? I see, let me look in chat because I'm handling this. I see that, and we've answered all those questions. Okay, great. And I'll repeat that a couple of times because people are just popping on now. All right, any other questions about bankruptcy before I move on from this screen? All right, let's do that. So what does that mean to you when you're writing a contract, or if you're listing a contract or listing a property and you get an offer? I think it's a good practice, if you don't know that you have a list of already pre-written special steps from our contract committee and our legal counsel, Wiseman, you have a whole jambalaya pot full of well-written special steps. And when I teach contract class, I usually tell the agents a well-written special step says what, when, where, how, and what happens if. If you don't answer those 5 questions, you have not written a good special step. Why? Because you're leaving a loophole for someone with a little more experience will say, well, you said when, you just didn't say how. Or you said how, but you didn't say what if. The main one, can anybody tell me the main one that everyone forgets out of the 5 that I just talked about that usually gets them in trouble in a contract? What do you think it is?
What if?
What happens if? Yeah, that's the main one. We always talk about how, we might even talk about when, but you don't say, well, if you don't do this, you lose your earnest money. Or if you don't do this, we can terminate. Or if you don't do this, blah, 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 you fill in the blank. That's the number one thing when I get involved in a situation and I read the special step and say, well, you didn't say this, so fighting for the earnest money, we can fight, but you know, a court or a broker would look at this and say, I don't see where you could fight for this. So this is special step 502. SS means special step 502. If you use Remind to do your contracts, they're already preloaded. All you have to do is type in bankruptcy or type in 502, and this will pop up and you append that to your contract. If you're using Command, I'm not sure. So if someone knows how to find those special steps, it's a good practice to just have those somewhere so you can copy and paste. In Remind, you don't have to copy and paste. You just click the one you want and it appends to the contract. Questions about this? Great. Remember to include your language in your listing also. So I don't see this very often, and I get a lot of broker calls about certain things like probate, bankruptcy, short sale. And when I go in and look at the listing agent never mentioned it. So if there's ever, let's just remember this, if there's ever a third party who has to have anything to do with this transaction, that should be disclosed to the agent in private remarks, or you can add the special stip to all your other documents that you upload to FMLS and Georgia MLS, just so that agent knows, add this to the contract, or in your negotiations, you can add it. But you want to say that this sale is contingent upon, a third party. Sometimes the trustee will give you a certain language that you have to use in your contract or use in the listing. Also inform the closing attorney. Your closing attorney is part of your team, and nothing worse than, yes, they are supposed to check the title and this and that and the other, but they, depending on when you go under contract, when this person filed this particular situation, they may not be up to date on that. So I work a lot in probate. So when I know that we're going to a closing and it's probate, I immediately let the attorney know, by the way, this is a probate situation. We've got the letter of testamentary, so on and so forth, because then they have some due diligence they need to complete. There's some things they need to verify. When they send the paperwork to your seller to fill out for their loan payoff and so on and so forth, it would be helpful to let them know, so that you stay on time for your closing, that this is a special property or a special closing. Does anybody, you don't have to raise your hand, but has anybody experienced or heard someone talk about that? That they did not tell the attorney. Okay, now we have a team of lenders and attorneys and inspectors and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, you're the ringleader, or fortunately, you're the ringleader. You have to make sure everyone knows what's going on. Okay, do not make an assumption because you hand them a contract that they read it. They're looking for what they need in order to close it. All right, any questions about bankruptcy before we move on? Anything to share about bankruptcy that you've experienced before we move on?
I did have one of my very first deals 27 years ago. I was selling my client's home in Georgia. She had moved to Chicago, and unbeknownst to anybody, she just decided she needed to keep it to herself. She had filed bankruptcy in Chicago. And when I walked into the closing office at 9 a.m., the other agent jumped me. And then I took her aside and I said, do not do that with my client. I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So we went and met with the attorney, and I put him on the phone with the attorney in Chicago. 8 hours later, we closed that house. I don't even know how, but it was crazy.
They probably had to talk to the trustee, and money talks at the end of the day. If somebody's going to be made whole and you have a buyer and a seller and there's money sitting there ready to make everyone whole, things can happen.
Yeah. It was just disappointing that my client just literally, she thought she was going to get away with it by filing in a different state.
I'm so glad you said that. That's the number one thing about this distress topic. A lot of times the buyer or the seller, I keep saying buyer, the seller thinks, oh, I'll get away with this. We'll close it and that'll go away. No, it's tied to the home. Always remember, sometimes you have a first-time home buyer who is now a first-time home seller. So they don't understand that process.
And that's what she was.
Friday, and you've got to ask that question. Hey, when you go to a listing appointment, I usually ask, are you a first-time home seller? Because you assume because they're a seller, they know everything. No, they were a first-time home buyer who's now a first-time home seller, or someone who hasn't sold in 12 years. I closed the lady that I sold her house to her 12, 13 years ago. And while we were sitting at the closing, she goes, man, this isn't what it was like when you and I closed the first time. I said, yeah, it changes every hour on the hour. And also, she had done something. And when I got the CD and looked at it, I said, you didn't tell me this part, and I didn't have this on the net sheet. So your net sheet that I gave you is $3,000 difference. She goes, oh, I thought I was just going to pay that when I got my money. See, a lot of people think that too, is I'm going to get my money and then I'll go pay that bill. No, that's not how it works. It runs with the house. So we can't trust you with that money. And then you run off to
Absolutely, because
Chicago.
they didn't pay it beforehand.
Right, right. What makes you think we're just going to hand you thousands of dollars and trust that you're going to go do that? So that's why we have liens on properties and things of that nature. And that's why the attorneys do what they do, so we can make sure everything, the title is clear. And it wasn't a big deal because there, she was walking away with a decent amount, but I was surprised when she said that, because I'm so thorough, and I believe I'm so thorough anyway. And so when she said that, I'm like, no. So you just never know. You have to check at all times. All right. So if there's bankruptcy, there may be divorce. All right. Now, I don't know this world very often. I've been married for quite a long time, and my mother and father were married a long time, but I know this happens. And when this does happen, usually you'll get the call, come list my home, I'm getting a divorce. Well, there's certain things that should pop in your mind. Do they have a divorce decree, or do they have a divorce certificate? Now, if you've gone through this and you feel like you want to share, please do, because this is not a territory I'm familiar with as far as how it all works, but I know what I need to ask for and I know what I need to do. So when they do a divorce decree, they're going to court to split the proceeds of whatever, children, money, house, so on and so forth. And if they're going to do a certificate, then that means it's kind of like a DIY divorce, where it's amicable. What's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. Is that how it works? And so they agree, and then that gets recorded at the courthouse. You want to ask those questions. Do you have a decree, or do you have some type of agreement that's been notarized or set with the courts? And if you can, get a copy of it, because guess who also needs to know this? The closing attorney. And what I find many times, we list a property, one person will tell you everything is great, and then all of a sudden it's not, because maybe the other spouse or significant other will not sign. Okay. I'm dealing with a situation now, past client, they are partners. The partner did not buy the house, but when they refinanced, she put her on the title. And now it's not a friendly environment. Let's put it like that. And so we had to go through court, and finally a certificate was signed so that she can now sell the house and put it on the market. And they've agreed a DIY type situation as to how they will split the proceeds. You'll have situations like that. Divorce is not traditional like it was 20, 30 years ago. Sometimes you have partners, sometimes you have boyfriend and girlfriend, or girlfriend and girlfriend, and boyfriend, and all that kind of stuff, that they bought the home together. And so when someone is saying come to sell it, you need to figure out where's the paperwork, especially if the person is on the title, okay, or on the mortgage. So sometimes they're not on the mortgage, but they're on the title. So you want to ask those questions on how that works. If the person calling you is on the mortgage and on the title, but they have a significant other and there's an issue, the significant other in this particular case is not a factor, because they're not on anything. So really you're okay to sign with that person. But if you've got multiple people on the title, all those people have to sign, because at the closing, that's how the money's going to be wired. Okay. Any questions, comments about this?
I just had a closing several months ago where a divorce decree was involved. It was pretty good, but what I thought was ironic was, I don't know what happened beforehand, but the judge, he set the price of the sale of the home.
Yes.
And it was about 100,000 less than what it ended up selling for.
Thank you for saying that. So when you're talking to your seller, sometimes this might be their first divorce. I say that because that's the world we live in. But at the end of the day, I always look at it like this. Try to work it out, because who wants a judge to decide? Same thing with probate, same thing with bankruptcy, same thing with divorce. Who wants a judge to decide? Because they're just looking at black and white paper saying, do it like this.
Yeah, they just want it off the books.
That's right. They want it off their books. The courts, especially in Metro Atlanta, are backed up by months. and years. And so, if there's not a lot to divvy up, they're not going to clog up the court with back and forth stuff. They're going to say, this is what happens, hit that gavel, next. So the DIY is probably, in my opinion, my only play an attorney on TV, work it out. But if you can't, because there's lots of property or situation and kids are involved and pets and all the things that are divided, then you may be at the mercy of a judge deciding what that is and what that price is. So you're exactly right. I do have that in here, right here on this third paragraph, where it talks about most judges can make that decision sometimes. All right, thank you for sharing that. So guess what? We have a special step for divorce. So sometimes you will be called to list a property, but they tell you, I don't have all of that back yet. So all that means is you don't know how things need to be divvied up or who needs to sign or whatever the case may be. So you want to kind of alert that co-op agent that this is a third party situation and that you need to understand that we're waiting for the documents, whether it be the DIY certificate or the decree, to be signed off by a judge. Okay, and so that just means the final judgment, maybe that person doesn't have it in hand yet, but it doesn't mean they can't move forward with listing. You just want to put a special step in that listing or in the contract if you happen to get a really quick contract on something, to say, hey, we're so excited, we're ready to rock and roll with you, but I want you to understand we have a third party situation, and hopefully you'll know where you are in the process to be able to share that with the other side, to say, I know you're working on a loan or so on. It's cash, not a big deal, but if it's a loan, that could affect their time frame with their loan. So just know that. And if you're on the buyer side, then I would probably put something in there to say, hey, if we don't know something by this date, then we have the right to back out of this and get our earnest money back, because we don't want to wait forever for a final judgment. Okay, questions about the special step? Okay, remember to ask if there's a decree from a judge or if the homeowners are in agreement and they've done a certificate. Don't be blindsided by an uncooperative spouse or significant other. This is the main one I usually see or get a call from an agent about, that, it started like this, but now the other person won't move out of the house or they won't sign or whatever the case may be. We all learn in BOLD and everything else that we attend when we're learning about listings that have everybody in the house that has to sign. Everyone, even if they don't have to sign and they have a say of some sort because they think they do. You need to have all the decision makers. Do I have all the decision makers here at the house today? There's nothing wrong with asking that. Oh, well, grandma needs to have a say in this as well. She gave us the money to buy the house. Great. Grandma needs to be here too, or we can Zoom her in, because there's nothing worse than putting the, kibosh on your deal when you have to deal with multiple people, parents and so on and so forth. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to discount their advice or opinions, but that's exactly what it is, advice or opinions, unless they are signing this document. So if someone's going to be swayed by those outside forces, just bring them in so you can hash it out before you get too far and have someone in their ear saying, don't do this or whatever, and just, now here goes your listing, here goes your closing. Okay.
There was this, oh, go ahead.
And then I was going to say the last thing, as I've said on everything else, also inform the closing attorney immediately so that they can make sure they have a copy of that divorce decree, they make sure it's legitimate, blah, 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 because that's part of their title search as well. Yes, comment.
Oh, there's an agent in my office, his very first deal in real estate, brand spanking new in real estate, was a patriarch had died, and there were 6 people that he had to go through that were like on title and siblings, and I told him, good luck.
Yeah, I've only had one like that. There were 4 or 5 people on it many moons ago, and it went well, but I was nervous because I was like, if there's just one holdout in here,
Yes, and
it's gonna
that's
cause
always, there
problems.
always is. Oh, no, we can
Mhm,
get more than that. Oh, I don't want to
mhm,
sell it now. It's not a
mhm.
good time. But
In
yeah.
in that
And
case,
it,
I had everyone in the room at the same time because I didn't want that to happen, and we closed just fine. But what if I didn't do that? You
well,
know?
and they were having trouble finding people because these were some elderly people.
Ah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it was, a semi nightmare to say the least.
Yeah. So if you're newer to the business and you're on this chat today, just know that sometimes, you learned in school, there's usually one or two people on a title. There could be 12 on that title. There could be a corporation on that title, and they have to get permission from everyone in the corporation and so on and so forth. So just know when you're looking up the tax records before you go on an appointment, or if you're the buyer's agent and you notice there's several people on there, you want to make sure those names match what you're seeing on your contract. Nothing worse than, the closing I had Friday. I noticed, I don't know if you guys have experienced this. This was the first time I experienced it, where he asked my client for more than a driver's license. And it was because of so much fraud going on, where they wanted the driver's license and two other pieces of identification, because of so many people starting to try to sell the property, and they don't own it. Sort of like what we're experiencing with the rental market, where it's not their property, but they're advertising it and getting the person's money, and then they move in and find out they aren't supposed to be there. So there's so much happening in our industry now that I didn't experience 27 years ago, when I started. So I would just be very careful with the stuff we're talking about today, because this is also where things can get a little sketchy, or not to distrust anybody you're talking to, but just have your ears sharp for what's being said and what's being presented to you. All right, thank you for those comments. All right, short sale. So it's funny that this is called a short, the word short, because there's nothing short about a short sale. I have closed short sales that took years to close. Yes, years. We were that determined to sell it, and the buyer was that determined to buy it. And so they were willing to wait. A short sale is a real estate transaction where the homeowner owes more on the home, and they're underwater. I suspect that people from 2020 and maybe even 2021 that stood outside in long lines and did no due diligence, no appraisal, no nothing, and said, I'm going to get rid of all of that and I'll pay you 50, 60, 70, 100,000, a million over ask, might run into this if they sell the house in less than 10 years. That's just my 2 cents. I could be wrong, have no problem eating crow. But because I've been in the business for 27 years, Barbara helped me here, we've seen this kind of thing before, when people make great decisions to buy a house, but poor decisions on giving up some things. So you're starting to see, here's a perfect example. When I started in the business, people that paid cash did an appraisal. Let me say that again. Anyone who paid cash did an appraisal. I can tell you, if I'm paying cash for a property, I'm getting an appraisal. Why are we so excited about a person who pays cash? Why? Because it closes fast. However, if they call you back to sell it and you can't sell it for the price they paid, there's a problem here called a short sale. Now, with cash, it doesn't matter, but if it's a loan, then they're pissed off because most people think everything appreciates. But if you were around in 2008, when no one had equity and short sales were abundant and REOs and foreclosures were abundant, it's because people used their home as an ATM. And then when the market crashed, they couldn't sell it. And we had plenty of inventory. Now we're 2023 with the opposite. So when you deal with a short sale, they're going to call you. They're going to let you know we need to sell the property. You may notice maintenance that's not done. Grass is tall, just a little stressed out or whatever, or it could be pristine and you don't know. You need to ask the question, how far are you behind? What do you owe? You'll do comps, you'll notice, hey, you can't sell it for that. But we may be able to go to the bank to see if they will take a short sale. Now, banks are not in the business of taking short sales. And we are in a market now where we are short in inventory and prices are high and equity is high. So they could choose to say, well, we'll look at a short sale. But behind the wizard's curtain, they have to go to all the note holders and the attorneys, everyone to say, hey, this person doesn't want to pay us all our money back. Will you accept a short sale? That process, known as a short sale, could take 6 months to a year. And by the way, after you've waited for them to give you a third-party answer, after you have a executed contract, they could contact you and say, thank you so much, we've decided to foreclose. Okay, so just know a short sale is work. Your job is not to negotiate the short sale. We're licensed realtors. We don't negotiate short sales. So you might want to have an attorney do that, or let the attorney know that this is a short sale. They can do it. They usually charge for that. All your job is to help the homeowner collect everything they're supposed to collect and send it. You would need an authorization to talk directly to their bank. A lot of times the bank will give you a package, or not you, but the homeowner, a package of hardship. It's called a hardship package. And their property is probably sitting in the loss mitigation department. Okay, so when your seller tells you, especially if they're a first-time seller, they don't know this process, they're going, well, I called my mortgage company and I dialed the 1-800 number and I got this payoff and so on and so forth. If they're behind at least 90 days in Georgia, it's in loss mitigation. They've received a please pay us after 30. They've received a please pay us after 60. Don't let them tell you they haven't. They just didn't open the envelope. And then in 90 days, that's when they will get a letter saying, okay, this is it. If you don't make this money up, we're moving you to foreclosure. And that's a notice of default, or NOD. You might see that. Now, once that happens, then there's an attorney involved. And once the attorney is involved, unless they pay off what's owed, it's going to foreclosure and they'll get a foreclosure date. However, if you go to the bank and you say, I need to try to do a short sale, then first they're going to try to do a loss modification. I was going to say mediation, modification, to see if you have the income for them to kind of reorganize your loan and then get you back on track. Or they will say, okay, now a short sale will not, please hear this loud and clear, will not be approved without a contract. So as a listing agent, you can list it. You list it as a short sale. You'll put in private remarks. I'm going to show you what you put in private remarks, that this will be approved by a third party due to a short sale. But what's more important is, once you get, let's say you get multiple offers, the bank doesn't want you to send them multiple offers. You send the best offer. So it's still negotiated between the buyer and the seller. And then once you have that, you will send a net sheet and the offer to whoever the person is that is handling the short sale. If your seller receives a hardship package and they leave one item out of that package, guess where that package goes? To the bottom of the pile for you to start all over again. I promise you. You will send the same documents 15 times to 15 different people, or maybe even the same person. They do not have time to call your seller and say, oh, you were missing the 2-year tax documents. Oh, I noticed you didn't send the W-2s. You will say, well, I haven't heard anything in a week. And you'll call and they'll go, oh, we didn't get this. They're not going to call you and tell you what they're missing. So some banks are better than others, so I don't want to lump them all in one pot. And then there are some that are like, keep in mind, your seller may be calling Texas, but the loss mitigation company may be in California. And I can promise you the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So there's a lot of work involved with a short sale. If this all sounds like I don't ever want to do a short sale ever, find people in your office that are CDPE certified, or you get CDPE certified to learn how to do it. Or you can, I think we have some MAPS coach clinics that teach this as well. I did my CDPE many moons ago, and so I do know how to do it. But if this is above your pay grade, get someone to help you, whether it be the closing attorney or team up with an agent in the office that understands how to do this. And because you can't just list it like a regular listing. Don't be fooled by this short sale name. The process can take months or years, and the bank could still foreclose. Okay. Any questions about what I just talked about? Has anybody experienced it? They think they may be experiencing it. Any comments here?
I have probably the most unbelievable short sale story. Goes back to 2010. I had my clients call me. They owned the penthouse at the Paramount. They wanted it to list for 1.2 million. They paid 900 for it. I said, there's no way we'll get 1.2 in this environment. Anyway, then I gave it to another agent who had sports athlete ties. They wanted me back. I came back. The whole time I'm dealing with the asset manager who's out in California. He's begging me to bring him a contract. He told me, Leanne, bring me a dollar contract. I needed to get the process rolling. I called over probably 1,000 agents. I told them that. No one brought me an offer. One person brought me an offer for $350,000. Yep. I said, I call up the asset manager. I've got a contract for $350,000. He got silent. He said, Leanne, do you think it will even appraise for that?
Yeah.
And I said, if it doesn't appraise a penthouse in Buckhead, 2,000 square foot, 30-foot glass windows, rooftop terrace, if that doesn't appraise for 350, we're all in a heap load of trouble.
Yeah. Where is that, and can I buy it?
So they accepted the 350.
Yeah. Wow.
When we had been listed.
But that was what, 20 years ago?
No, that was in 2010.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
Because, we didn't come out of it really,
So like 2012, we kind of came out,
13, like January 1, 2012, the light switch went on.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah, the other thing, there was something I was going to say. You mentioned something and it triggered something in my mind, and now it's gone away. When you said about the appraisal, they will either send, most of the time when we're doing these, they will send an agent to do a BPO, which is called a broker price opinion. Back in the day, you used to get a good penny for doing those. Now they want you to go to Ellenwood for $15 to do one. So that's a no. But basically, a BPO is similar to our CMA, except for a little bit more extensive. They're looking for whether the home is listed. Now, if you're someone looking for listings and you wanted to make this your thing, your niche, the bank will not consider a short sale if the house is not listed with a realtor. If that seller says, oh no, I don't want to pay a commission, I need to short sale this, the bank is not going to give them a short sale. They want a professional involved in this process. Otherwise, they're foreclosing. So just know that this is a niche that you could go after. There's not going to be a lot of it, but I think over time we might see it if people sell these homes in less than 10 years. I could be wrong about that, because you still have buyers out here that, yes, we can ask for more from sellers, like closing costs and things like that, when it wasn't happening before, but sellers are still trying to get more and more every time they put these homes on the market. So just know that short sale is a niche that you could look at and say, I think I like that. It's work. If you just like doing the regular living room, dining room, great room listings, stick with that. I tend to like the fun stuff: short sales, probate, divorce, bankruptcy. It's interesting, so I call me crazy, but I kind of like the crazy stuff. All right. Thank you for sharing that about the short sale. So this is very, very, very important. I think if you're dealing with a short sale, you want to make sure, first of all, you should be giving all the consumer brochures to your buyers and sellers and just let them know. When I teach contract class, I tell them, just put all the brochures into a zip file. You give that to them. I don't care if all the forms don't apply to them, but for Greg's purposes and just for your compliance purposes, you've given them the brochures that they can choose to read or not to read, but you will have a date stamp saying, yes, I gave them this brochure to read. I would encourage all of you to read this form. It's only 2 pages, realtors. And when you read it, it basically spells out everything about a short sale. If a person is approved for a short sale, they could be taxed on the income. So let's say it's in this brochure, they give an example of $50,000, okay, that they were not able to pay the bank back, and it was shorted by $50,000. The bank has the choice to either dismiss that judgment, because that's a judgment, or put a judgment on that person's credit along with the short sale. The short sale is better than a foreclosure, by the way, if you could think of it that way. And they could report the $50,000 to the IRS as income. Now you might go, income? I wasn't paid anything. Well, if you shorted the bank, they look at it as, we gave you the money. You didn't pay it back to us, so it's income. All right. So sometimes people think, oh, we're done, it's over. And then they get this IRS bill. So you want to make sure that they have this brochure. And if you have to highlight certain paragraphs for them to read, if they don't want to read the whole thing, because the first part of it talks about the process. And then it goes into if the bank accepts the short sale, what happens, what's in the package, W-2s, tax records, what is the hardship? You have to show a hardship. Now, let me say this to you. Just because you can't get what you want for the house and now you want to try a short sale, the bank doesn't always constitute that as a hardship. A hardship is a divorce, a death, a medical illness in their mind. There are short sales that have been approved because the market back in the early 2000s, the market was just trash. And so those short sales were approved because they couldn't get certain sales prices. But let's say you run into one today with everyone with lots of equity, they're going to want to see a real hardship, not, oh, you overpaid in 2020 and now you can't sell it. Okay, so just keep that in mind in your consultations. And then, of course, you have the investors who are like, find me a deal, find me a deal. This could be a deal. So if you're not searching MLS and Georgia MLS for short sales for your investors, shame on you. That's another way to find properties for them. And if you're a listing agent, make sure you are tagging it as such so that you can get those offers quicker. Because the quicker you can get an offer, the quicker, as Leanne said, you can get the process going. So we do have F610 as a short sale contingency. And the reason you want to add this to your contract, because it tells you the right to terminate. So you're not stuck, buyer. If you decide to go after this short sale, and you're getting a loan, you don't want to wait forever. Or even if you're paying cash, you don't want to wait forever. So you would put a date in there as to, well, if we don't have a decision from the bank by 90 days from now, 60 days from now, you may already be in the process when that person brings a contract to you where the bank has all of their W-2s and they just need a contract. So you might say, hey, we're 30 days into that short sale approval, so let me get this contract to them. But again, you are giving the bank only one offer, not all the multiple offers if you should get one, and it needs to be the highest. Okay, I wouldn't say the highest, the best terms. And by the way, the bank could come back and say, I need the agents to go from 6% to 5%. So they can dictate the price, and they can also dictate the commission. They might say everybody's taking a hit. And then release of the seller's liability. This is where the seller would ask, are you going to release me from liability? Or are you going to report this judgment or report this shortfall to the IRS? Earnest money, I would probably not start any inspections or any earnest money until you receive notice from the bank that they approve this short sale. Okay, so you don't tie up the money and so on and so forth. And then also, sometimes people used to ask me, well, can I rent back? No, you cannot. You foreclose, you short sale, they're not gonna let you live in the house now. And if you say, well, my dad will buy the house, has to be at arm's length, can't have any relatives, friends, all that kind of stuff buying the house. Okay, so if they ask those type of questions, the answer is no to both. Questions about short sale before we move on to the next distress?
Deborah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I put a note in chat for the clients to also watch their credit reports, because if the mortgage company is stating that the short sale is to be forgiven, sometimes the credit reporting agencies will report it as a foreclosure.
I didn't know that. I hadn't had anybody tell me that. So that's good information. So what Barbara is saying, if your seller does have the pleasure of getting a short sale, make sure the credit bureaus do not report it as a foreclosure. I would, and this is paperwork that I would probably keep forever. You know, this, you just never know. Some of these banks that have gone under, and then someone gets their documents and they decide to call your client and say, oh, you owe us $50,000, when you know you've already cleared that and you've got the documents. This would be, you know, one of the things. Again, I only play an attorney on TV, so consult with your accountant and attorney. But having done these short sales for many, many moons, I would keep this documentation once you close.
And you're right, Deborah, because my nephew, I had to short sell his house a few years ago. Well, last year he called me and needed that documentation again to show that it was actually forgiven and not a short sale. I mean, not a foreclosure. And thankfully, I still had his information and was able to provide it to clear that up for him. Because at the time he was trying to do I believe, a home equity line of credit or something. And that documentation saved the transaction with that part of the transaction.
Good. Great information. Yeah, that's a great thing to say also, Barbara. Foreclosure will take a person longer to be able to buy again versus if they did a short sale. So, you know, we're the consultants. We're here to explain these things to them, and then they can decide which way to go. And of course, consult their attorney or accountant if they're unsure. Thank you for that. All right, let's move on to the next one. So with bankruptcy, with divorce, with sometimes short sale, not so much in short sale, but with bankruptcy and divorce, sometimes you have to have court permission. So special step 624 talks about seller's obligation under this agreement are contingent upon approval or order of the appropriate court having jurisdiction over the sale. So who would have jurisdiction with court permission? Bankruptcy. You know, sometimes probate. I didn't put probate in here as distress because it's not always distress, but it's a form of a distress type of property also. So if they don't have what's called their letter of testamentary, then you may want to put this special stip in to say, we haven't received that yet, because what I'm finding is that's what I specialize in. And a lot of people don't know about that, and they list it. And then they are a week out from closing and they call me and go, the attorney says we can't close because this is a probate. Well, that's because you didn't tell them that it was a probate. And so therefore they weren't looking at that. They think, you know, Mr. Smith is showing up for closing and Mr. Smith died 2 years ago. And when you look at the tax records, sometimes the names haven't been changed. When a person takes over the person's property and things like that, they'll change it to the estate of. And then that person who you're working with is either the executor or the administrator. Executor if they have a will, administrator if they did not.
Yeah, we just closed on my mom's house in she died in January, so we had to go through probate. But let me ask you this. So what is the typical timeline in Georgia? Because in Kentucky, it was almost 8 months.
It's typically 60 days, but the courts are backed up. They've been backed up since COVID. And it seemed like they cleared up everything and then all of a sudden they're backed up again. So we prospect probate and we nurture a lot of people because they don't have their paperwork yet. I don't try
Yeah.
to list anybody who doesn't have their paperwork, because
Right.
then if I list it, then you're going to be upset with me when you can't close. I like them to have their paperwork and then we move forward. So right now it's looking like about 90 days.
So you mean you like them to have the paperwork that the attorney,
The courts.
yeah,
Mhm.
naming the executor or the
Yes. Yes.
administrator? Okay.
And that's the only person I want to deal with. I know there's siblings and heirs and everybody who's chopping at the bit. I only talk to the person that can sign the paperwork.
Yeah.
Okay. So always a good practice to add this to your contract and notify, of course, again, the closing attorney about this contingency. I know it's in your contract, but again, they're not always reading it. And by the way, we say attorney, it's really the pre-closer and everybody behind the wizard's curtain who's preparing this, and they may not catch this contingency. So you want to make sure that you point it out when you send it over, whether you put it in the email, when you're emailing the contract over, or for the attorneys that have the portals, you want to put that in the notes. Please be aware this is a probate. Please be aware this is a bankruptcy. Please be aware this is a whatever. Okay. It will save you a lot of sanity. Okay. Taxes. We're at the time of year where taxes are due, and there are some people that haven't paid their taxes in years. The way it works in Georgia, you don't pay your taxes, your property taxes I'm talking about. We're a non-judicial state. They can then take your property, or not take your property, but advertise that you haven't paid. There are note buyers that can buy those taxes. They can hold on to it for a year and a day. And then if you're able to pay those taxes before that year and a day, then you will pay the tax plus 20%. The 20% goes to the note holder who bought it. But if a note holder doesn't buy it, it sits there for years and years and years until the tax people at the courthouse or the county says, all right, let's foreclose on that property for $2,000 in back taxes, and the house is worth $250,000. Let me say that again. Someone buys a house for $2,000 and it's worth $250 because they didn't pay their property taxes. That shouldn't happen, but it does. Okay. And currently the Georgia interest rate that can be paid on those back taxes to a note buyer would be, and there are professional companies in Metro Atlanta that do this and buy these taxes. You'll usually, if you've ever gone to the courthouse steps, which I have, especially in Fulton County, it's a very well organized wheel. And there's a group that, they're in one place and they're just buying the tax liens.
Yeah, should be banned, in my opinion.
I've had the pleasure of watching this in different counties just for my knowledge with one of my mentors. And I'm like, I want to go with you one day so I can see how all this works. And it wasn't always like this, but now it's just a well-oiled wheel. And after 1 year of right of redemption is what it's called, and it ends, the person who purchased the tax deed has a couple of options. They can foreclose on you, or they can force repayment through the courts, or they can go ahead and foreclose, or they can hold on to it and evict you and then do whatever they want with the property. So this is an example of a real tax county. This particular one is in Cobb, if anybody recognizes the streets. This is in Cobb. I was able to pull this last night. There were 444 pages of back taxes on properties in Cobb County, totaling $4 million and some change as of September 2023. Could you prospect? Could this be a niche for you? Sure. Could you call these people to let them know, hey, let's try to sell this so you can pay off the taxes. Otherwise, down the road, somebody could buy it or it could be foreclosed. I noticed this one on Graythorn Lane was $17,000 worth of back taxes. I blocked out the names to protect the innocent. But at the end of the day, can you imagine $17,000 if they're going, I can't pay that. So either there's some distress there of some sort. Either they can't pay it or won't pay it and they can pay it, or there's something else going on in the house. Okay. But the property tax, they'll let that sit there for a while. Now, will they go after somebody for like $84? Probably not, This one right here is on the verge of somebody doing something at some point.
Where did you get that list?
The Cobb County tax assessors list. Most of the counties have the list on their sites. So tax assessor. All right, HOA issues. Again, we're coming upon the fourth quarter of this year. People start having their HOA meetings. You know, a lot of times a lot of people don't read their HOA covenants. Some of them don't even receive it when they close on the house, and they should. But if you don't pay your HOA dues, I'm helping an agent now where the deal didn't close on time because we now found out the person has something like $27,000 worth of HOA back dues and fines because they were illegally doing what do you call it, Airbnb. And most HOAs are not going to foreclose, but if you read the covenants of most HOAs written by Wiseman, they can foreclose on your property. So your house is worth $500,000, you owe $37,000 worth of back dues. They can foreclose for $37,000 to get their money. Now, they don't take precedent over property taxes, the first and second mortgage, if you have that, but they could. You know, before they foreclose, property taxes are going to step in, first mortgage is going to step in, but they're not going to let that happen. Usually it just sits there until you sell the house. So it's very important to ask this question. Have you paid all your dues? Do you know what they are? Do you know what the initiation fee is? All of these things. Do you have any? It's on the seller's disclosure or the community association disclosure. And so you want to verify that they're answering that properly. You do not touch that form. They fill it out. And if they're a first-time home seller and they've never filled that out before, they may want to call someone at their property management company to say, I've got some questions to ask. I'm going to sell my house, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times if they owe money, I don't know about you, but I've put signs in the yard, not recently, but signs in the yard, only to get a lovely call from the property manager or the president of the board to say, I see you have 123 Main Street on the market. They owe us money. So if the seller doesn't tell you, sometimes they watch for that and they will.
Hey, question. I see on that. Can you go back to that last slide?
Mm-hmm.
This is interesting. I might have to call one of my attorneys. A first mortgage recorded before the recording of the declaration. Now,
right.
I'm going to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, before the recording of the declaration and a secondary purchase money mortgage. So as long as neither the grantee nor any successor grantee on the mortgage is the seller of the lot. Yeah, or home.
But how would that? I mean, because if you're buying the property and you've got a loan, so you do all the paperwork. They sign the paperwork and they send it in, get new deed and everything. I mean, wouldn't that first mortgage, the loan, and all the documents go with it all be recorded basically at the same time?
It should, but I have seen some counties that it didn't happen that way. So that's where it gets a little messy. And then of course you want to get an attorney involved.
Yeah. Okay.
So always during your consultations, ask about dues, get the CAD is the community association disclosure, find out if they're current or there are any back dues, because when you're doing your net sheet, you want to include those. Find out if you're the buyer's agent, if they had any penalties, find out for what. Because if that penalty or that fine was not corrected, I helped an agent one time that was, she represented the buyer, they were buying $1 million+ house, but the seller had been fined for something in the yard. I don't know if it was bushes or something, tchotchkes in the yard, something like that. I don't know what it was. I can't remember, but I informed her, please make sure you check and see if the fine and the penalty has been remedied, because guess what? Once your buyer takes over, they inherit that problem if it has never been remedied. And now they're going to be fined and penalized. So if someone has fines and penalties, also make sure it's been remedied. Did they paint the house a color they were not supposed to and didn't get permission from the architectural control? Did they stick ornaments in the front yard and you're not supposed to? Do they have a pizza truck parked in the driveway and they're not supposed to? All these different things, you want to make sure that it's been remedied so it doesn't follow your new buyer. Be thorough during the listing appointment. I already said that. Unforeseen costs may delay your closing. There's one I'm working on now. We've got almost $90,000 worth of stuff. We're trying to have attorneys work it out with different people to see if they will lower that amount so we can close. Never rely on information in FMLS and Georgia MLS. I see so many agents that copy what another agent put. Oh, it's $200 a month. I'm going to put $200 a month, and it's $250. Okay. Find out if there's a Facebook community or a website with an agent tab where you can download covenants and find out the latest and greatest. If the listing agent should know. I'm always surprised that the listing agent can't tell you what's going on in the community. They should be asking those questions at a listing appointment. And then you could also check the Secretary of State's website for contacts. So for instance, if you say, I don't know, I can't think of a subdivision name, but you could type it in the corporation search bar under Secretary of State for businesses and find out who the president is or the contact or whatever. It may not have the phone number, so you may have to do a little bit of skip tracing, but at least you can find out who is part of the board and who is the president or who is the treasurer, whoever they've put on there as the registered agent. And then we talked about the community association disclosure. Make sure it's completely filled out. If something is missing, then you want to counter, please answer, number 5, number 6, so on and so forth. I find that agents don't look at this. They just get their people to sign instead of looking at it to make sure everything is filled out.
One thing about the CAD, I stress to my clients, the sellers, you have to make sure it's to the penny. If you were 1 cent off, $20 off, $2,000 off, at the time of closing, the attorney is taking it from you, not the buyer.
That's
they had
right.
So strict on that because sellers were just, like you said, just following along what someone else wrote. And buyers were, being shocked at the closing table for owing $2,000, $3,000 or more $1,000.
Yeah, there's a situation I'm helping an agent with now as the broker that's exactly what happened. Something else was written on the CAD, and now that we got all the numbers of the seller's fines and stuff, we also have found out that the monthly is not correct, and that could affect your buyer's qualification for the loan, because that is a factor into, it doesn't in this particular case, but if that buyer is just squeaking into this home and then you throw another $100 on top of a HOA payment that they weren't expecting, that could derail that loan because that information wasn't given properly.
Absolutely.
For you newer people in the business, please, please, please make sure you check that. We also have a special stip, number 621. Seller warrants that by virtue of owning the property, buyer will not be required to be a mandatory member of a community. I use this all the time. If somebody tells me, oh, there's no association, this protects my you-know-what, because I've verified, I've asked, I've checked, I can't find anything. And that way, if someone says, well, you didn't tell me there was an association, I've moved in here now, and there is one. Well, seller is signing this on the under special stip saying, nope, there's not one. So if that turns out to not be true, that's a lawsuit. That's not a come after Keller Williams, come after the agent. It's a lawsuit because you lied on the contract. So I include this all the time if there's no association. Okay. As a matter of fact, I had this in the contract when I had my closing Friday. The attorney was looking at the paperwork and he was going over something and he goes, and is this an HOA? And I'm like, he didn't read the contract because I had this in special steps. So, but no, there was no association. Questions? Questions?
Great class.
We went 5 minutes, but I thought it was, let me look in chat and see if there was anything. We kind of talked about everything there. Any other distress situations that you guys have run into or have you thought of, or, that I didn't talk about today? I think I covered pretty much all of them, unless there's some weird stuff going on out there. No? All right. Well, I want to thank you for being here today. Next month, I believe, I'm not sure what the dates are for October, please tell your colleagues because they call with broker questions and we talk about a lot of this stuff on broker chat. And unless everyone's going back and watching the video, maybe that's what it is. But
Where do we watch the video?
I shouldn't have said that because I don't know.
And my last question, what show do you play it on?
No, I think it's on the Easy Button site, whatever that thing is called. Raven.
Yes, it's the Heart of Atlanta YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
Atlanta Group.
I know they're always videotaping us, and so I have no idea where it goes. I always tell them they must have put it on some OnlyFans site. I don't know where it is.
Just curious, what show do you play an attorney on?
I love attorney shows, by the way.
I thought you said you played one.
Yeah, well, I was joking about that, not really.
Oh, I thought you did on a show.
No, my mom always thought I should have been an attorney. Because I will turn over. Oh, and Raven just put in the chat the YouTube channel for you guys if you want to copy that. And if there are other recordings that Tom or myself have done, and then while I was out for a while, Barbara jumped in and subbed for us and stuff like that. So we'll probably see a lot more of that coming up as far as asking other people to sub, or not sub, but just getting different perspectives. But this is what Tom and I do each month, every other Monday. And so if there's anything that you would like us to cover, let us know, email us. I'm at dblue@kw.com. That's my broker email. So make sure you send it to that one, because in FMLS, you'll see my team email, but my broker is dblue, very easy for you guys, at kw.com. Thank you so much for attending, and I'll see you next month. And if you have any questions, don't feel like you have to wait until broker chat. You're welcome to call us and we will be happy to assist you.
Thank you, Deborah. Glad to have you back.
Enjoy the fall
Thank
weather. It's my
you.
favorite time of year. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.